Men are good, as are you. Indeed, men are good, as are you. And you know who else is good? The crew we've got here today. Just an amazing bunch of people. Let me tell you a little bit about each one. Jim Nuzzo is a health researcher based in Perth, Australia. He writes about men's health and other topics on his Substack page, The Nuzzo Letter. Check it out. It's well worth checking out. And Jim has done some fantastic work that is advocating men and boys and men's unique ways, or men's unique health and the way we are different. Hannah Spier is an anti-feminist psychiatrist. I never thought I'd put those two words together. Anti-feminist psychiatrist, but she broke the rules, and she is that. She authors the Substack and YouTube channel Psychobabble. And Hannah is one of the best critics of the mental health profession that's out there today. Lisa Britton writes for Evie magazine. She writes for a woman's magazine about men's issues, which is really critical because women are starting to hear this message, and Evie and Lisa is bringing it to them. A fascinating piece. She also is, I think she got a recent article in the LA Times, so she's starting to go mainstream. She's got a great Twitter channel, and all these links we'll have below for anybody that wants to see them or go check people out. I highly recommend checking out all of them. And David Maywald is with us. And David wrote this book, The Relentless War on Masculinity. Now, David's a husband, father of a son and a daughter, which what? It gives him the view of both boys and girls. That's so critical for anybody to be able to see. And boy, you get a close-up view. I had a daughter and a son. It taught me a huge amount. But David is a passionate advocate for boys' education and men's well-being. He's done that for over a decade. He founded an award for men in leadership, uses the digital brand Celebrating Masculinity to uplift males, and has spent this year researching and writing his first book. It's called The Relentless War on Masculinity. And we're going to talk about that book today. David and everyone, welcome. And David, maybe you can get us started by just telling us how things got started for you. How did you come to write this book?
It was born out of frustration, but the birth of my children, did have a big impact as well. Seeing how they grow up and thinking about the world that they'll be living in and that we as parents are bequeathing to them. So yeah, I've
Hmm.
been watching the education situation for boys and young men for 3 decades now in Australia, and I've done a lot of work in research and analysis, understanding the difference in health outcomes,
Hmm.
suicide, well-being, mortality, and so on. And what really sparked, this project, this writing of the book, was the US election, the vibe shift. It was the recognition and the change in perceptions. Opening up conversations which previously had been not just ignored, but they'd been outright dismissed and downplayed. So I saw that as being a huge opportunity to broaden to that conversation to a lot more people.
Hmm. Yeah, let's hope it does just that. And the book is out now or will be out soon?
I've been working towards the launch on International Men's Day from since
Ooh.
February. So it's always good to have a hard deadline, isn't it, guys? Where to keep you accountable and particularly in those tough periods of writing. I love the research and I love getting more data and going down rabbit holes. And this project sort of exploded to multiple times what it should have been. But having that hard deadline, knowing that 19 November was the day that I was going to launch this book, come you know, come what may, that really kept me anchored and was a big motivator to get it out.
Indeed. Indeed. Does anybody have any questions for David about the book or comments?
I'll jump in.
Jump in, Jim.
Well, David, I've got heaps of questions for you. We are located in the same country, so I'm kind of interested to know your perspective in terms of what's going on specifically in Australia and how that may or may not differ from other places in
Hmm.
terms of the relentless war on masculinity. And then what is it that you see as that war on masculinity? And maybe that's what your kind of chapter headings might help us understand potentially. So
Hmm.
any of that, I'd be keen to hear your opinion on.
The one sentence pitch here is that the relentless war on masculinity is a cultural, rhetorical, chemical, legal, and institutional assault on all males.
Amen.
And the book goes into each of those areas and unpacks them and gives examples. But it also goes back 25 years, 30 years, some cases 35 or 40 years,
Yeah.
looking at the red flags and the warnings about where we were going.
Right.
For example, The War Against Boys, which was written by Christina Hoff Sommers back in 2000. That's 25 years ago, right? So the warning signs were there.
Yep.
We knew that the education systems were becoming feminized and gynocentric and favoring female traits back 25 years ago. When you look at Nathanson and the Misandry series of books,
Yes.
that again, that was 25 years ago. And that was looking at the media and entertainment, uh, you know, stereotyping and that really bad examples of male misandry and um, it's typecasting in the 1990s. So there's plenty of evidence here that this has been building up over a long period of time, and particularly to get to your question, James, about Australia. Um, what stands out is that Australia, Canada, the Nordic countries have become increasingly gynocentric in the last couple of decades. That the institutions, the laws, culturally, even the media is visible. So you can benchmark it, for example, looking at the percentage of female students in university. The US had a majority of female students in 1982, which was 43 years ago. So we've had, over 4 decades worth
Yeah.
of university campuses being increasingly dominated by young women and by female academics and administrative staff. So yeah, in Australia, I think where we're at the moment is that with a federal government that has a majority female cabinet
Hmm.
and also a majority female Senate. Now there's an interesting question because what will they do with that power? Where would they take that? They've already got a gynocentric legal system. They've already got funding. For example, you pointed this out in the area of health research in Australia. The National Health and Medical Research Council spends 5.4 times more on women's health research than on men's health research.
Right.
So what are they going to do? Take that to 10 times? The last four budgets, for example, the last four federal budgets have made new announcements of spending in women's health that were $1.35 billion, and they've made new announcements in men's health of $23 million. So that's a factor of 60. So are they going to take that to a factor of 100? What are they going to do with this power that they have at that federal level now? And there's a big contrast there to the United States, where obviously you've got Trump as president, Republican control Congress. You've got the disparate states, and you've got red and blue states and red and blue cities, and also quite a strong Christian population compared to Australia. Australia, Canada, and the UK have changed in character with the mass immigration, especially in the last couple of decades. And so that means that Australia doesn't have the same type of ballast around Christianity and Britain and white culture anymore.
Interesting. Yeah.
I would like to jump in if I may.
Jump,
be
Hannah,
next,
jump.
Tom. Okay. So I really love this that we because we need to go to war. I completely agree with you, and I think we need to frame it exactly as you did. Now, this has been written on, like you just said, for decades, and I'm happy to see that there is more attention offered the position of boys, what we're doing to boys and young men. And so I thought we might discuss something current, something that just happened. So I don't know if you guys saw, but Ali Beth Stuckey, she held a speech now, I think it's 2 weeks ago, TPUSA event. It was huge, where she claimed a couple of things. One was that feminism had failed women, and the second was that porn has destroyed men. And so she mentioned, she says, men, we need your masculinity, you need to be strong. And that sort of, I saw that the same sort of the same things in your book. And so great, we're talking about it. It's being, it's being broadcasted. But the response she got, it shocked, even it shocked her, it shocked all the other conservative influencers. It was just this fierce backlash. How dare she? And she's continued. It was just more of the same. She's criticizing men, and you could just see this. There was this fatigue in hearing criticism towards men, and men has to do this, and now there's more demands, and so that leaves me then thinking, what can we do? And I agree. I didn't think it was I didn't think it was very well phrased. I thought the sort of uh, feminism has failed women, as if it was ever meant to be this good thing, and women had no role in that. And porn has destroyed men, when porn is something that you do. So the implication is that men did that to themselves, and they're destroying themselves, and they have control. And so there's just not enough female accountability there. But just the backlash I thought was very interesting, because they just don't want to have it. And so what can we do? How can we, what would be the tactics in this war? I guess I would want to know from you.
So, pretty clearly what you can see in the book is a vision of building a coalition, which is much bigger than the current supporters for men and boys. It is about turning away from some of the extremes, and it's about focusing on the center. It's about men and women collaborating. In particular, there's an appeal in the book to mothers of sons. Those, Hannah, you relate to this. The women who, through their 20s and 30s, benefit from gynocentrism, a year or two after having a son, they have an epiphany. They realize that the things that helped them to get through university, to get jobs, to earn more money, to get promotions, they realize that that system is actually rigged against boys and young men.
Right.
And, even pre-release for the book, I've had a number of mums of sons reach out to me saying that they've pre-ordered, that they are looking forward to reading it. And I've said to them, please review it. Please go on to Amazon and Goodreads and tell people about your experience as a mother of sons.
Yes.
People need to hear that.
Yes.
Because they have this unique view and this empathy. And I really, emphasize this in the first chapter of the book. I talk about the decreasing percentage of women and men who have both a son and a daughter, which gives a unique insight into the future that they'll live. So the vision that I've got is about toning down some of the rhetoric. It's about building coalitions and expanding the range and the breadth of men and women who are pro male and also pro female, and finding the less controversial areas where we can agree to make progress. And I'm hoping that will eventually build up momentum. But I don't think this will come easy. In fact, I think
Right.
at every stage it
But
will be
what were the
opposed.
things that they saw? This is difficult for my boys.
Or, for example, in school, the expectations around how they engage, their behaviour, the curriculum that's been set around regular assessment that's much more suited to the traits and preferences of girls than it is to boys. Um, there's the medicalization of very normal, innately male behaviors. Some parents, are confronted by that. They don't want medicines pushed onto their son for just being energetic and outgoing. And there's also, a concern that an increasing percentage of boys have diagnosed developmental disabilities, autism, ADHD. There's a real concern about that. And what we've seen in Australia is one in six-year-old boys is now a participant in the National Disability Insurance Scheme. One in six.
What?
Yeah, that's crazy. That's it. Yeah, I think that's just a very small part of the problem. I also I miss from those because I see that the mothers are the ones who are pushing for the ADHD diagnosis. They're the ones who come into my office with the pre-filled out questionnaires. It's not the dads, and they're the ones who will have no problem suing for divorce at the earliest convenience. And so I find it great to hear that mothers come and say, "Oh, this resonates in my poor boy," but then will they really change something in their lives to that will directly impact their boys, like really, quit their jobs and be present, for example. I mean, I really enjoyed your book, but to be completely honest, I missed some of the female accountability aspect.
Hmm. I can give you an example of the advocacy I've done in Australia. Um, the most popular post that I put up within the last 9 months, it was a post that was just boldly proclaiming hold women accountable. It got over, I think it's over 4,000 likes.
Yeah,
And it was so countercultural. I think the reason that people really responded to it is they're not really seeing that anywhere else. That they're
yeah.
not seeing that message
Right,
and hearing that
right.
message. And when they were surprised to see that, when it was put in front of them, I think a lot of people recognized, yeah, we should. We hold men accountable. We should hold women accountable. That's
Yes.
the fair thing to do.
One of the things that I liked about the book the most was that it's the first part, at least, is very readable and welcoming to moderates, you know, which I would have had a hard time writing that book, the first part. But you did a great job, David, because it welcomes in. It says, things have been different and women have had this and that. But then you move from that into actually holding them accountable, saying misandry, gynocentrism, gaslighting, and gamma bias. I mean, all those things. So it's like it moves from, come on in, ladies, to, and here's the problem, boom, 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 which I really liked. In fact, I would like to tell people out there this is a book you can send to your relatives. This is a book you can send to your family or to friends who are kind of on the edge, who are thinking, well, maybe there's a problem, maybe there's not, because it'll give you a good sense. And I think they'll feel, other than the title's a little bit a little bit strenuous, but the basis of the book is very welcoming and also kind of holds people accountable in certain ways. So I liked that part of it. That's my 2 cents.
If I could speak for a moment,
Please do, Lisa.
yes, I thought your book was very well written.
Yeah,
Um, it was unapologetic but respectful.
yeah, right.
So it wasn't that you were kind of having barriers up. You weren't afraid if you offended somebody, but you also were very respectful about the way you're presenting the information.
Yes.
So I thought that was in the quality of all the information there. This is issue that spans, it's so broad because it covers so many different areas of society, relationships, children, adults. So, one member of our space had said before that our movement is the most fragmented movement there is.
Yeah.
And I believe it's because we all kind of come from a different place. We all are standing up for kind of different issues within the broader issue of the crisis of boys and men. And you had the ability to not only present the information that spanned the entire crisis, but you also weaved in the advocates and the people who are out there that people might have seen before,
Yes.
where they're coming from, what they bring to the table and to the conversation. And you tied together the group of people trying to raise awareness. So this book to me, it felt almost like it would be a great book for somebody to read who is unsure about what the issues are and see these very respected people who are speaking out on it. But it's also almost like a book, a guide for somebody who wants to become an advocate, who
Mm,
wants to enter this space. It
mm,
was almost a roadmap of this kind of taboo movement to understand who's involved, why this is happening, where their expertise are. So I thought that would definitely be how I would promote the book,
Mm.
is if you're interested in this movement and you want to have all of the facts, all of the research, read this book, and then
Mm.
you'd be ready to go as an
Mm.
advocate for boys and men at that point.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
It's really perceptive, Lisa, and
Yeah.
I haven't explicitly used that reference, guidebook or this is the roadmap. I haven't explicitly referred to that in any of the marketing, but you picked it up,
Yeah.
and it was in my mind in the last third or so of the time that I was doing the
Mm.
writing. I got some advice from a legend of mine, a hero of mine, a legend in the space of boys and men. He really convinced me to write something a lot shorter. Um,
Yes.
I
Yes.
I got up to 115,000 words, you know, 400 pages long, and it was longer than Scott Galloway's book. And I looked at it, and there was this expanse, like this amazing jumble of ideas. And I realized at that point that I'd written a book for myself because
Yes.
I love the numbers, I love the research, I love the
Hmm.
analysis and the depth. And I realized that that was a potential market size of one. And um, Warwick Marsh convinced me to radically to cut that down and re-edit it. And what I did then was just focus down on a much smaller number of concepts and ideas, and to shape it around the four horsewomen concept in chapter three, to really distill down that summary. And it is exactly that, Lisa. I'm
Yes.
hoping, that busy mums and dads will pick this up, and within 2 or 3 hours, they are going to have the most incredible, journey of getting up the curve and understand what's been happening, because they're just busy. They've got
Yeah.
jobs, they've got kids, they've got
Yep.
businesses,
Yep. Yep.
they've got so many other things going on. They don't
Yes.
have time to read 300 or 400 pages. They need the summary. They need the executive summary.
Exactly.
Especially in our space, something we need right now is more advocates. In my opinion, especially women. I think that will help break what Hannah was saying before about holding women accountable. We need more women in the space because it's a bit less taboo for women to hold other women accountable. So I think getting more women involved, speaking out, will help the movement, at least in the beginning. I mentioned in that talk about how, as it's becoming less taboo for men to write books like you did and get out there speaking on it, women should make sure we allow, like, not stand in the way of men doing that. We should let them take that space.
Mm.
But in order to get more women on board, I think it's still a bit taboo to hold women accountable, unfortunately. Hopefully
Yes.
we break that down where we can. That's something I speak on and write about a lot, is
Right.
we need to hold women accountable. But this book is a great way to create more advocates, which is something we desperately need right now in this
Indeed.
space, is more people.
Indeed.
David, so your book, the subtitle, When Will It End? My question is, we've already hinted at this a little bit in terms of the different steps. Maybe if we focus in at sort of an individual person level, what can an individual person do to kind of, let's talk about your four horsewomen. So we've got misandry, gamma bias, gynocentrism, gaslighting. How does an individual person sort of push back against this, especially in the Australian context? Because you published a fantastic critique of the adolescent man box survey that came out recently,
Mm.
and they are just relentless in publishing stuff like that. And you can see how people feel a little bit kind of helpless. It's overwhelming. The propaganda is relentless. But what would you advise kind of individual people to do to try to challenge these ideas, or what recommendations do you have?
Well, a big part of, stepping up and, um, you know, being in the public space that I've seen is opening moving the Overton window and making it acceptable for other people to question and to push back. So by, for example, publishing that Substack against the adolescent man box, I was making it more acceptable and easier for other people to criticize that research, to criticize the deficits focus on men. And now they're putting a deficits focus on teenage boys, for heaven's sakes. I mean, just listen to them. Don't force them to answer specific questions in your ideological and political framework. For heaven's sakes, just empower, support. Listen to them. They know what will help. So, I'm trying to do that and for every person who does that, probably they're being watched by 10 or 100 or 1,000 people. And I think we should encourage more people to call out the double standards, whether they understand what misandry is or what gynocentrism is. I think double standards is a really simple way to explain that men and women can be held to similar standards of accountability, that we should have similar expectations and opportunities. So I think that's a good framing of the ideas in the book, but in a much simpler language to talk about double standards. And as each individual starts to question, it becomes so much easier. And then the ball starts rolling and more people push back. That's what I envisage over the next 2 or 3 years, is that there'll be more and more men and women who start to ask the question, why are boys and girls treated differently? Why do we cater for innate female traits and preferences? Why don't we cater for innate male traits and preferences? So I think that's the first step. As more and more people ask those questions, it gets heard by leaders and decision makers and people in positions of power. That's really crucial that we speak up. If more people don't speak up, very little's going to change.
Correct.
It's so entrenched institutionally, culturally, legally, that it will require many people to speak up, to be heard by their politicians, to be heard by the bureaucracy. So that's the first step. What are your thoughts, James?
I think, honestly, my thoughts on a lot of this stuff is individual people make the difference. It takes, I guess, the riskier people to go out there first, and then the next riskier people, and then more people follow, and more people follow. I say this in part because of my personal kind of academic cancellation story, and I can tell you, at the university that I was canceled from, there are more and more people now sending me messages, sending me emails. So once one person takes that leap, then it makes it easier for the next person. Then that makes it easier for five more people, and then 10 more people. So I always think a lot of these things come down to individual level people just doing what they believe is right, and then other people will follow.
Amen. Which calls on us all to speak what we see as being the truth, and speak it loud and clear and let it out there. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
the
think
framing that
thinking a little bit more aggressive. I think we need to lean on policies, right? We have to start rolling some of these things down, some of these things back. I mean, all the privileges granted women over, I think, we won't really be seen as taking this seriously until we start talking about all the subsidies for daycare, for example. Like I would like to see that rolled back, right? Just to see to make us really have to make the tough choices and I mean, rather than just yeah, we have to speak up and everything, but I don't see anyone really arguing that we have to make it better for men in their marriages and that way make it make it more difficult to sue for divorce, for example. Someone told me now that in 2014 here in Switzerland there was a divorce reform making it closer to 50-50 custody, and then obviously reduced alimony for men to pay, and then they saw this divorce boom right after that was done. And it's like they're just, waiting. But that would be something that's concrete, that would make a real difference, that you have more paternal presence, for example. Like I'm missing that we're talking more aggressively about it like that, and seeing as we are calling it a war.
Yeah. And when you say boom, you're talking about a drop in the number of divorces?
An increase.
Increase.
Men were they couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford to divorce. They didn't want to lose their kids.
Huh.
Then they were more likely to get 50-50 custody of the kids, and didn't have to pay so much alimony then, because it's
Right.
related to the
Right.
custody. And then the men started taking out more divorces.
The men started
It's a
taking
very
out more divorces.
interesting,
That's
yes,
interesting because
yes.
in the U.S., I think the places where they've instituted shared parenting, the divorce rate has dropped
Yeah, I believe
dramatically.
Kentucky,
Was it
was it
Kentucky?
Kentucky?
I think
Yeah,
there's two or three states that
Kentucky.
are doing that, which is
It
just
might have increased a little bit on the men filing for divorce, but it definitely dropped with the women filing for divorce. So it might
interesting.
have balanced out a little bit, or
Yeah,
That's a good point.
they
Hannah, I'll have to
definitely
look
did
into
lower.
that. That's an interesting idea that it
that
may
just blew me
increase
away.
men's divorce rate. That's fascinating.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think those would be the things we'd really have to do and start
Yes.
arguing for. I mean, I then
Well,
the whole the daycare situation, that it's a pet peeve of mine. But as soon as you say that you should stop supporting daycares and start saying, that if you choose to have a kid, you have a responsibility and you have to be at home for at least 5 years.
yeah, I'm with you
Just
100% on the policy. I mean, we really need to have policies change. But I kind of see the first step to make that happen is to speak up, because policies
yeah, of
and
course, yeah.
politics is downhill from culture. If you can change culture, culture will automatically change politics, so that's the
That's
first
what I've
step is
been
to,
saying for years too.
yeah,
I first started 7 years ago going to DC all the time and trying to change policy, meeting with lawmakers. And I realized that these politicians, all they care about is self-preservation first and foremost.
correct.
So if they don't think this will get votes, they're not going to talk about it. They're not going to bring it up. So I realized before we could really change policy, we had to change minds,
Yep.
minds of the people.
Yes.
Because when the people's minds change and they demand this from their leaders, then the politicians will start speaking out on the issues, knowing it'll help them win votes. So
Exactly.
it was probably about 2020 where I switched gears and decided to double down on the public messaging. I kind of pulled back a little bit on going to DC and meeting with lawmakers. Now that I feel like the conversation has switched, it's become a trendy topic, especially since the 2024 election. I've been heading to DC more often because
Uh-huh.
everybody wants to meet now. Everybody wants to hear, what policies do you think? Where about fathers, this, that, Democrats, Republicans. They're all interested in meeting right now. They're all interested about policies because they saw that the people, it matters to them. Look
Yes.
at what happened in the election. So I feel like once you change minds and hearts, then you can change policy. And I think Hannah's right. We're at that point now where policies can be changed as long
Yeah.
as the right people are at the table.
Yeah. I remember my
That's certainly the case in
frustration.
the United States, but because there's been a change of administration and in Congress as well. But if you look at Canada, the UK, and Australia, we've got 3, 5 years or so of centre left governments ahead of us, and trying to get, for example, changes in family law, significant changes, which would be transformational. That that looks to be virtually impossible. In fact, I think the risk is actually that some of these policy and legal and institutional factors become worse over the next
Yeah.
3 to 5 years in Canada, the UK, and Australia
Gosh, I'm
because of
so
the color of
sorry.
those governments and because they are sympathetic to Greens or others who are further to the left than the governments are themselves.
Hmm.
So, and that's partly why I've written the solutions, the ten suggested solutions and reforms in my last chapter.
Hmm.
Quite a lot of those relate to culture change. They relate to individual actions that people can take. For example, we might not change the marriage laws, but people can choose to get married in a church instead of just choosing to have a secular legal marriage. Now that's the sort of decision that carries significant emotional, spiritual weight for the whole of your relationship. Having
Does it?
the
Does
the
that have a
legacy,
real impact
having the
on
legacy
how
of,
they
of
live?
the Christian covenant of marriage as the foundation of your relationship and where your children come from. I believe it does, Hannah. I think it does
Yeah,
have
because I
emotional
see people
resonance.
get married in churches and synagogues all the time, but it doesn't change. It's just because they want that kind of wedding. They don't want that kind of marriage.
Mm.
Well, if you follow the Christian ideas, the it would lead to a more fair marriage, I think, with the husband leading in a loving way, and the wife also leading in a loving way. It's very different from what we see today, So I agree that moving towards a Christian-based marriage is probably a good idea in some ways, but I also agree with Hannah that it ain't happening. Just because you get married in a
Right.
church doesn't mean that you have a Christian marriage.
Yeah, I completely agree. So don't get me wrong. I mean, I live a religious life myself. I'm more religious than most people, and I can see the advantage of that. And at the same time, I said on YouTube, I have this big red pill audience, so I sort of see what they comment, and I really appreciate them. Red pill, I don't like this. Sorry, like I have a lot of men commenting on my videos, and so I sort of see how they feel and how they see the situation, and they're all quite secular. They wouldn't want to go. Okay. Let me think, because I agree with the moral. With the moral framing of your book, and I am happy to see this Christian revival in the US. At the same time, I'm wondering if there can be an on-ramp for the seculars, right? So that's why I'm trying to frame everything that I write and podcast in a very secular, very clinical way, because I worry about alienating those who need help, who need this messaging. The it I don't have the conservative religious people in the therapy room. You know what I'm saying? Those aren't the ones who need our help, and so that's why I'm concerned about the on ramp. I don't know if you can say something about that.
It is becoming easier for people in the West to call out just how unhealthy young women have become about the ideology, the politics, the mental health, um, the polarization. It's it's very hard to see um, birth rates, marriage rates increase when you've got a hardened group of young women who are on the left and a group of slightly conservative young men who are
Hmm.
being ignored and dismissed and have fewer opportunities. They're being out-earned, they're being out-educated. So, but it is becoming more acceptable to talk about that. Claire Lehman, for example, at Quillette, the Australian independent media organisation, she's written about this and talked about this. So it's easier to now talk about. It's certainly not mainstream, but some of the topics that you've talked about, Hannah, cluster B and personalities and those issues, that's becoming more socialized and more widely spread, especially amongst young people.
Hmm.
Mm.
And I love what, Tom's done as well. The Understanding Men series, I've watched all of those. I thought they were really insightful. And, I think Tom's been ahead of his time and he's provided this content that's accessible. I'd encourage
Yeah, it's
everyone to
amazing.
go to Men Are Good and look at the
Yeah.
resources there,
Yeah, I've
to go
never
back
had
through
more
them.
responses from mothers than when I had Tom on, so I had to have him again. I was like, he's fantastic. He's the goat. Just, just this is concrete advice that we can really use right away. I've used it myself. We have implemented the Tom method. Yeah, we always ask, what would Tom do?
So in terms of changing policy, there's legislative and regulatory changes. where you generally need a majority of one house or both houses, or you've got to get it through the executive, plus you've got to get through the legislature. Then there's the bureaucracy. And that's a tough nut to crack as well, as the UK Conservatives found out.
Oh,
Um, you can direct and issue orders that do not get fulfilled. And that's like comes back to what Lisa's saying about driving culture change, about winning hearts and minds. And that's why I suggest that in Australia, the UK, Canada, a large amount of the effort be directed towards winning people over to the cause
yes.
and expanding the coalition over the next 3 to 5
Yes.
years to build that base. And it'll come through, for example, parents, being advocates for their sons in school, asking about the opportunities, asking, for example, reading material for boys. Do the libraries at
Right.
schools have
Hmm.
books that actually engage the boys? And,
Right.
for my kids, they've got a great library. It's great for boys
Right.
and girls.
All
But
right.
a lot of boys have been starved of content that
Yes.
really inspires them and lights their fire.
Yeah.
In health, it'll come
Yeah.
at, listening to male patients, being co-designing health services that are actually empathetic and inclusive. And I've had a great response to a line about inclusion. Inclusion means listening to all voices. And obviously that includes men and boys. You can't
Duh.
just choose to focus on inclusion around your particular favored groups,
Right.
but then exclude your non-favored groups.
Right.
That's not inclusion. And that's something that will appeal to progressives. And it's a way of cutting through, and it's a way of them realizing the importance of bringing boys and men into the groups that they consider to be important.
Well, I hope you're right. It certainly hasn't been what I've seen.
Definitely, definitely using the language that appeals to
That's
them. That's
that's a good
something I
point.
do often.
Yes.
I got called out numerous times by people who are against us for co-opting terms they have or phrases. Um, but so I softened it a little bit, but I use a lot of the same language that they use because it drives the point home that if they are looking for inclusion, representation, those things that they're constantly talking about for the other side, then shouldn't we have representation of boys and men in the conversation? Shouldn't we have representation in schools? So I often use the same language. Even just yesterday, there was a comment on a post where somebody was going against me, and they said, for Lisa Britton's post, take out every time she says boys and men, put in girls or women or another identity group, and she sounds just like a woke, left-leaning, crazy person. So somebody definitely did pick up on that, but the reason why is because I'm trying to win over the people who don't agree with us.
Right.
I'm not speaking to the choir. I'm not preaching to the choir. They're on our side. They see the issues.
Correct.
I'm trying to reach the people who don't agree with us.
Yes.
Those are the minds and hearts that we need to change. So
Yes.
using language that might tap into that understanding and break down those walls is probably one of the best tools that we could use.
Yes. Agree.
And taking
Well,
back ownership as well
also,
over that language, men have ceded the term masculinity. We have let other people tell us
mm,
what they think masculinity is,
Correct.
and they've created these ridiculous straw men of broken men, of immature manhood, of caricatures of masculinity, and then they've torched them. And they've torched them because they want more funding for their services and their organizations,
Yep.
and they want more job security.
Yep.
So instead of assertively taking ownership of the language around men and masculinity and manhood, we have allowed anti-male forces to own that language and tell us that we're toxic and to put us into man boxes. It's ridiculous. It's because we haven't stood up for ourselves.
Yes.
And this goes to the innate preference that both men and women have for females over males. We cherish. We cherish women
Yes.
and girls.
Yes.
We value them in society. But by doing that to such an extent, we've ceded our own agency.
Yes.
yeah, but there's no men don't have the power to stand up for themselves now. they are held hostage by women and all the powers we've given women in society. I don't think we can in any way blame men for ceding the territory. They've been pushed out. That's why I think all this, the pro male stance has to be taught by women. Just tell women, give them their space back. Like,
Huh.
let them stand in front of the cave with that bat, you know? And also to Lisa's point, I think we make a mistake if we use their language, right? You can't fight feminism with words like empowerment and agency. You will have to dare to fight it with pro-male language. Otherwise, you're going to end up with what happened to Ali Beth Stuckey, where men won't have it. They just hear more of the same when we use that language. I completely understand what you mean. Maybe you're probably right. That's the way to get to politicians. But I don't think that the choir is always with us. We're so fragmented. We have to make sure that we don't alienate men in the process.
Yeah, going back to what happened with Ali, it was a mixture, a recipe of events that led to that backlash. One of the things was that the video and the part of her speech that went viral didn't include her calling for women to kind of go against feminism and dismiss feminism. So that was one reason why it received such backlash from men. But another, and I commented on this, is that something conservative women and the supporters of Ali need to understand is that it's a fine line between calling on men to step up and be men and not acknowledging enough that we push them down. So a
Exactly.
lot of my followers, I've been told that they believe conservative women are even worse than left-leaning women. It's like, wow, that's a surprising thought. They said no, because the conservative women have benefited from the advantages of feminism, yet they think they're the good ones by telling men to man up and do this, this, and that. So they are kind of getting their cake and eating it too, and also at the same time thinking they're so much better than the progressive women. They're also demanding what men should do, and they're also not acknowledging that we need to look at ourselves and make ourselves better. I know in that speech that Ali said, she did mention how feminism broke them, but again, she also is framing it as women were victims of feminism. So yes, she was saying how women could view what was happening to them, but there still was a demand for men to be better for women. And then there was also a lack of how the big tech and sports gambling, the porn industry, how they've taken advantage of men and their vulnerabilities when it comes to OnlyFans, porn, things like that. It's, of course, men have the ability to turn off the computer and not watch porn. They have that agency, you could say. But we can't demand they stop doing that, implying that they're kind of in their parents' basement porn addicts. We can't be almost shaming them for that without acknowledging this master, powerful kind of porn industry and the media that's kind of pushed them there as well. So I think what the men were upset about, what that backlash was from, was they felt that it was yet another attack by women without them kind of flipping the mirror around to look at themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very well said. Yeah. And again, you cannot talk about the porn problem without acknowledging how we have pathologized men's sexuality, and you also touch on that in the book, I think. And
Yes.
that's another way of saying, oh, let's blame tech and not take any account, so many marriages are sexless. Can we talk about that? Can we talk about what we owe men, how we want to treat our men in the so I think a better way to sort of, if you want to fix the porn problem, is how about strengthening marriages? But I completely agree with you. It was very
Yes.
well summarized, sort
I,
of the problem of that
the
speech.
whole thing reminds me of a woman saying, "You're oppressive," and saying, "You're toxic. Now can you change my tire?" It's like, wait a minute. It's like it doesn't make any sense. Doesn't add up. Oh me. Um, what were people's favorite part of this book? Anybody? I think I've already said what my
I'll go
favorite was.
first. I know what mine is. It's the four horsewomen.
Oh,
That
me too.
conceptualization. Oh, of
That
course,
was
Tom. We
good.
went
Just
we
the
I
went
like
with the
phrase.
that.
same one. Yeah, just bringing those together. Of course, like I was already aware of them as sort of individual concepts, but bringing them together in one book as a huge force.
Yes,
I thought that was such a great idea, and good on you, David, for doing that. I don't know if you want to
indeed.
comment any more about that. We've talked about it a little bit, but for me, that was the best part.
Yes. And there they are. There's the
Yeah, I
four
agree.
horsewomen: gynocentrism, gamma bias, misandry, and gaslighting. I'm with Jim. That was my favorite part too. The first part was good, but this really just sort of said, and here's what's happening, guys and girls. Here's what's really going on. And that's a critical piece. That's just a critical
You can
piece.
see it's the central chapter. It's chapter three out of a five chapter book. So
Yes.
it really is the core, and a lot turns on it. And all those examples. I mean, I've tried to draw the most outrageous, the most colorful, the most notable example, and the most recent examples as well, which is
Yes.
shocking.
Yes.
For example, a vice chancellor of a university in Australia gets asked, why has the number of male students fallen by 450 during the last 10 years?
Hmm.
And the deputy vice chancellor of the university is sitting there on the other side of the table and laughs twice and then
Well,
says, well, it depends how you look at it. It's good for women. When a question has been asked,
Shit.
the question was asked, why are male students falling and what are you doing to help, to lift the number of male students? And it's just completely fobbed off and it's not taken seriously. That was in February this year,
I
which
think
shows you the level of gaslighting and the difficulty that we are going to have in pushing back some of these cultural, institutional, entrenched levels of gynocentrism.
I think that
That's
example
so.
captures
I
all four
didn't,
of
David.
them.
I didn't realize that happened in February of this year. That's interesting timing because that's essentially when I was canceled
Hmm.
at ECU. And one of the reasons I was canceled is for my critique of the gender equity program at Curtin University here in Perth. And
hmm.
it just, that story that you've just told so relates. All I was doing, and part of that was just pointing out that the ridiculousness of that university having 60% female enrollment. They had a gender equity staff there, which was comprised of all women and one man, and they were actively advertising jobs where the purpose of that person's job when they got to the university to work there was specifically to recruit more female students, even though they already have 60% representation at the university. And I called it out in my Substack piece, and that was one of the things that actually got me canceled
Yep.
from the university that I was working at. So
Yeah.
it is just ridiculous.
It's crazy. Insane.
How about you, Hannah or Lisa?
I have to agree with James took mine. He took mine. So
Mine
I think
too.
that's very unfair. I call, as that was unfair. But yeah, the horsewomen, or was it horsemen, the four horsewomen. So I'd love to have you on Psychobabble to talk about those, to go through them in more detail. I think, and I just now had a conversation with a man about, because I asked my audience what they want me to cover, and one said, it's so unfair that we are expected to emotionally regulate the whole time while women aren't. And I
Yep.
just thought, when I read that, I thought that's exactly a very good good example of that, how we expect
Yes.
men to emotionally regulate,
Yes.
while women are called trauma victims if they have the same problem,
Yep.
and then that's just fine.
Yep.
Mm.
Gynocentrism.
Yeah, exactly. Or
You know,
wouldn't that be gamma bias?
I'd call it gynocentrism when I was doing therapy with men and women who'd had a child die. This is in the 90s. It was so obvious to me that when the friends would come up to, oh, what can we do for you, honey? How can we help? What are you feeling today? They'd come up to the man and say, how's your wife holding up? It's like, they didn't want to deal with his emotional side of things. And that really taught me a lesson. A woman's pain is a call to action, and a man's pain is taboo. And that's what we see over and over and over again. And David's book is hammering away at that gynocentrism that
Yeah.
lies underneath a lot of what's going on. The other favorite part of the book was, and Lisa brought this up before, was the last part with all of the people who are working on this. I really appreciated your doing that. Getting all those people together in one place. It was like, yeah, that was really a good thing to do, I think. And it does help people who are just starting out and wondering, where should I go next? It gives them some options about, where can I go to find out more about this stuff. So thank you for that, David. That was really thoughtful.
Yeah, thank you for writing this. It's
Yeah,
really
man.
needed. It's
Yeah.
really needed.
Oh boy.
Yeah, to help moms. Those
So
who
I'm
want.
hoping that it
Yeah.
does spark a positive difference. Obviously, I'd like more people to talk about gynocentrism. We've sort of talked about patriarchy to death and toxic masculinity and other things, but now I think a lot of people have seen and experienced and felt the strong female preferences and the pandering and the shaping of institutions and culture around girls and women. But they really haven't
Yeah.
had a language to explain what that is. And Helen Andrews, for example, the Great Feminization, she gives articulation to the implications of what it means to go past the tipping point of have majority female employees in a particular organization or industry, and then to think about some of the differences between how that industry might be led by males or led by females. So I think that that's certainly helped as a catalyst to encourage people to think about and to explain and talk and be open publicly to ventilating these issues rather than just to be talking about them in private and then to ignore them in the public sphere.
Yeah.
What I loved about Helen Andrews's piece was that it broke down the wall where all of a sudden we had 100 different perspectives on the feminization, whether that be people all the way on the other side
Huh.
or even further than she took it. I know I wrote a little bit about how it's not true feminine what's happening today, because if it were, then we would have more compassion for the people. We wouldn't be
Amen.
canceling people. We would have
Amen.
compassion for them to grow. So
Yeah.
there was like what I loved about her piece was she was accurate in many ways. Like most of it was right on point, but it brought out everybody else and their point of view on the feminization of society. And I think that's what's needed is somebody to take it there, someone to go there, and
Yes.
then it breaks it down where everyone can have their say, and it really gets that conversation going. So we probably need more people coming out with unapologetically saying the things, and I think your book does that, but
Yep.
respectfully.
Yes. And being
Well, I'm hoping
optimistic.
that it'll get some coverage in the mainstream as well.
Let's hope so.
Obviously,
Let's
it
hope
is
so.
getting traction
Mhm.
in some of the more conservative, slightly centre-right areas and publications. But I think the place that could really make a big positive difference is actually in the slightly left-leaning mainstream
Yeah.
publications, where they've had such a uniform approach to discussing this and preferencing female traits and girls and women over and over and over again. It's stale. And I think their readers even realize that they're reading the same thing over and over and over
Yeah.
again, which is why
Yes.
it's so great, Lisa, to get your work breaking
Yeah.
through into the mainstream.
Mhm. Well,
Amen.
it's funny. I've noticed it at least, so I'm speaking from where I'm at in America. It has become much more trendy to talk about it, thanks to Scott Galloway, Richard Reeves, their books. Everybody's kind of talking about the crisis of young men today. So something I'm seeing right now, especially over the past month or two, is a wave of backlash from the other side, kind of going against, almost they feel threatened by the focus on boys and men. So they're doubling down on their efforts. There was just a piece last week in the New Yorker about Scott Galloway's new book that came out. And Jessica, the writer for the New Yorker, framed Scott Galloway, Richard Reeves, and Rahm Emanuel as misogynists.
Right.
And that is insane. I tweeted, if those men are framed as misogynists, what are the rest of us framed as? Because those men are not misogynists. I would say they're the most left-leaning, feminist-leaning men in our space. So we're seeing pushback on even just a little bit of the attention here that's been focusing lately on boys and men. So I do feel that as the topic is growing and as your book comes out, things like that, where we will almost see an even bigger backlash coming at us. So how do you think we can fight that wave that would throw Richard Reeves and Scott Galloway out as misogynists? What do you think we could do to make sure that we don't get framed, or we could fight back, push back on that messaging?
Yeah, martial arts level engagement,
Thank you.
read how to have impossible conversations. That's a fantastic insight into how to deal with people, and accept that there are some of these conversations that we shouldn't be in. If if someone really extreme or inflammatory, you're not going to change their mind. So, I mean, you might enjoy the sparring, you might find it a bit exciting, but choosing, when we engage, and also, maintaining respect and tact and being able to live out with the values, the virtues that we really cherish and want to demonstrate to our children as well. We need to become a lot smarter with that too. I regularly on online groups with men, I regularly remind people, let's do positive things to help other boys and men. Let's not focus on the crazies.
Yeah.
They're going to be crazy regardless of what you do. Like, don't burn your time and energy on
The
those
one thing
people and
I'm
focus on
concerned
what they're
about
doing.
is a lot of this backlash is in the New York Times, is in the New Yorker, is in some of the most established pieces with great reach. So something that I noticed by these pieces lately coming out by them is it's encouraging other regular people to speak out saying, oh yes, I'm so sick of this. I'm so sick of all this talk about young men. And it spreads, it goes viral, it does influence, so at a time when we're trying to wake the regular people up, it does concern me that the most established outlets in the world are pushing kind of a throwback. The crisis isn't a big deal. The crisis of boys and men is not a big deal, and we don't have to deal with it. It's overblown. That's a big memo that must have gone out, is the crisis is overblown. So we need to counter, no, it's not overblown. It's something that needs to be addressed.
And I'm cheering these people on. The more crazy they get in their backlash, the worse they look to the moderates. The moderates are going to look at that and go, wait a minute, what? I just heard about such and such. So this is really in our favor. The crazier they get, the more strong, strident they get, the more we're going to benefit from that. So, yay, New York Times, make yourself look stupid. Which is exactly what they're doing. They're making themselves look stupid. And that's going to be an opening for David's book. When people start to see, well, wait a minute, the Times, they're not, maybe they got it a little bit wrong. David's book, bring it on, baby. Then that opens people up to a different way of seeing things.
Hopefully.
Yeah. What a good discussion today.
Yeah.
What a good
Speaking of,
discussion.
I have to go take some kids to football practice.
You better get to football practice, and we better
I have to
get
go
going.
get to
And
football
people ought
practice.
to buy David's book because it's a good
Yes.
one. And share it. Send it to other people. And thank you all for being here today. It's been a joy to have you here. And we'll look forward to doing more and seeing David's book skyrocket. So on that
Yeah.
note,
We'll do our best.
we'll do our best. And men are good, as are you all. Men are good, as are you.